This idea of hostage taking by authoritarian states, Russia, China, Iran, Belarus, Venezuela, it's getting worse and worse and worse. That happens because they know that we in the West are so keen for investment and money and trade deals that we're willing to allow citizens to be taken hostage or detained on completely arbitrary charges. And I'd like him to stand up and say, your interference in the UK ends now. The next time there is a Chinese spy scandal in Parliament, we will immediately expel all of your diplomats and shut your embassy. If there's any more interference on campuses through Confucius Institutes, we will immediately shut them all. And let's see a stronger, more robust attitude towards protecting British national security and British ideals.
Well, David Lammy is set to visit China this week to seek less confrontational ties with Beijing in a major reset of Britain's relations with the country. Mark Saber is director of the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. When you hear the Foreign Secretary talk of less confrontational ties with Beijing, what is your reaction?
My reaction is that we're about to see a massive sales pitch, a massive free-for-all for let China come in, buy our assets, buy our goods, drive prices down, and start dictating to the British what they can and cannot do on policies in all sorts of sectors. The word reset, if anyone has read a history book, a recent history book, was used with Russia in 2008 by Obama. What did we see in dealing with Putin? We saw increased clashes in Georgia, the invasion of Ukraine, Crimea, all sorts of military maneuvers in the North Sea and even on our own borders. And resets essentially with dictators mean that we will keep quiet while you do what you want. And in the case of China, we've seen over the last few years that they have used political interference, economic coercion, and economic might to threaten decision makers and also the public on what we should and should not be doing. And then they all often couch it in, we want friendly and good relations with neighbors. But if David Lammy genuinely thinks that he's going to be the one person in the world that can look Xi Jinping in the eye and say, stop being a very naughty boy and do what we want, and then you can have all the goodies, then he's slightly delusional on that. And it would be a wonderful time for David Lammy to be a statesman and not a salesman. It would be wonderful for him to say any other trade deals should come only after the freeing of Jimmy Lai, removing the bounties on the heads of people who've settled in the United Kingdom. And we should take a much more robust attitude towards dealing with Chinese transgressions in the United Kingdom.
Is it your view, Mark, that Jimmy Lai's case has been underplayed by the UK government for too long? I believe I'm right in saying that David Cameron was the only foreign secretary in recent years to directly raise his case with the Chinese. Why do you think that is?
I think trade and business. I think the organizations pursuing business deals with China hold massive sway in a country which is currently very economically weak. And so anyone dangling prizes and trade deals and so on is going to have huge leverage. It's shocking. I think Jimmy Lai's been in prison now for 4 years. He's had 5 foreign secretaries, 4 prime ministers, and he's still in solitary confinement. And he's never been seen by any British officials. No British consular staff has ever been to see him. There's never been a request to meet him. In fact, I was asked when I spoke to somebody at the FCDO about what they should be doing. And I said, well, the first thing David Lammy should do is say, I want to meet Jimmy Lai and force the issue in Hong Kong and with the Chinese authorities that he is a British citizen. He's only a British citizen, British passport holder, and he's entitled to have the full support and protection of our government.
So what would you, if you were David Lammy, what would you like to hear him say?
I would like him to firstly publicly demand the immediate release of Jimmy Lai. And if the answer is not, of course we'll do that, then he should board the flight back and say, come back and talk to me when you're ready to release our citizens. This idea of hostage taking by authoritarian states, Russia, China, Iran, Belarus, Venezuela, it's getting worse and worse and worse. That happens because they know that we in the West are so keen for investment and money and trade deals that we're willing to allow citizens to be taken hostage or detained on completely arbitrary charges. And I'd like him to stand up and say, your interference in the UK ends now. The next time there is a Chinese spy scandal in Parliament, we will immediately expel all of your diplomats and shut your embassy. If there's any more interference on campuses through Confucius Institutes, we will immediately shut them all. And let's see a stronger, more robust attitude towards protecting British national security and British ideals.
Mark, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Mark Saber there, the director of the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong.
Rishi Sunak. I thank the Prime Minister for that answer. Now, China, as he knows, has become a decisive enabler of Russia's war against Ukraine, supplying the vast majority now of Russia's imported military microelectronics and components, worsening the suffering of the Ukrainian people. So can the Prime Minister confirm that he is prepared to sanction any Chinese business or individual involved in aiding Russia's invasion of Ukraine, including secondary sanctions on financial institutions?
Yes, and we've called for that in the past. We continue to do so, and I hope this is an issue where we can have unity across the House.
That was interesting. That was Tim. That was a very hesitant yes. That was
a bit hesitant. He thought about that one.
Yes.
Well, he obviously thought, I have called for this in the past. I'm a bit queasy about doing it now when we're off to China to try and do business. But in principle, yes.
Yeah. But
I bet if he asked him, have you done anything in the last fortnight, the answer would be no.
But if he's a bit, there seemed like a bit of a trap there. If Rishi Sunak is saying that China itself is an enabler of Ukraine, and that obviously includes the Chinese government, he's basically calling on Keir Starmer to sanction members of the Chinese government for their support for Russia in Ukraine, isn't he?
Well, look, this is the role of the leader of the opposition. As I say, Sunak himself was a bit backward about coming forward on this issue when he was Prime Minister, and he's now making life a little bit awkward for Starmer in the same way. I think Starmer's accepted the principle of it. Whether he's accepted the reality, I don't know. But it's while it is serious, it's also there's a little bit of game playing going on here.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Alistair, what do you think?
I do think that he's asked, it seems, as we've said, a very conciliatory and unusually non-combative PMQ so far, but I do think that every single thing that Sunak said is expected a yes, and so Starmer's gone, yes, and then the second one was yes, and the third one was yes. And so I wonder if the fourth one is going to be about China or not. I somehow suspect not. But it does underline the complexities that we're dealing with. China is helping arm Russia. This to the point about Israel and Ukraine and China and all these conflicts, etc., that are going on, whether or not sort of trying to score points and get people to say yes across the mace is the most constructive way of dealing with it is another matter. But it just points to the situation we're in globally at the moment.
It's all linked. That's the point. I keep repeating this, and I'll never bore of repeating it. But the biggest supply of bullets to Moscow is North Korea, and the biggest supplier of bullets to Kyiv is South Korea.
Right,
it's all kind of linked. So the Asian world is not separate from this in any meaningful way. It's a sort of, there's a big old international sort of 3D chess game going on.
We've had a bunch of people getting in touch. Elizabeth says, how refreshing to hear a polite Prime Minister question time. I can't bear all that baying from both sides. Easy for you to say, Elizabeth. You don't have to talk about it. Whereas Jeff says, this is a fair point. Jeff says, where's all this coming from? Is Sunak on record as ever having China in his sights like this before? Is he, Tim?
Not really, as I say. Yes, they have done stuff against the Chinese, but under a lot of pressure. And certainly a lot of Tory MPs felt that Sunak, certainly as Chancellor and then latterly as Prime Minister, was a little bit more pro doing business with China because it's obviously a gigantic market and the Treasury likes that, whereas people like, Tom Tugendhat, Ian Duncan Smith and the others who have made sort of human rights and democratic rights and been critical of the regime, don't see it that way at all. And there is a pretty strong China hawk faction in the Conservative Party these days, and Rishi Sunak's never really been a member of it.